If you're a plumber or a friend in the trades, you're in the right place. Today we're going to be talking all about GBP with our friend Amy Toman, who is a nationally recognized expert in Google Business Profile Management and Compliance. And if you need to know who Amy is, all you have to do is Google her name, Amy Toman SEO, and the first page of Google will be all about her, signaling her strength as an SEO in her own right for her own brand. But Amy, welcome. And it's so good that you're here. You are a national expert, if not a global expert, at Google Business Profile. I'm honored and very happy to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a big fan of those who do home services. I will say I've worked with many people in this category, and I just always so nice. They're always so pleasant and just so willing to help out just to get things back where they should be. And I've been very, I'm always happy to help just because I've had such good luck in the past.
And Amy, the Google Business Profile for a plumbing company is vital. It is literally your anchor point to your community for people to find you. 78%, it is said, of unattached new customers are converting in the Google Maps section, and the Google Maps section is a function of the Google Business Profile. And that's where you come in because that's your area of expertise. You do other SEO as well. However, you have achieved something that is unusual, which is the diamond status or the diamond product specialist status. And I'd like you in a moment to explain what that is as now I might understand it. For those Harry Potter fans, you have access to the platform 9 3/4. For people who like pulp fiction, you might be like Mr. Wolf, who comes in and cleans up messes as a fixer. What is it that the diamond product specialist does, and why is it so significant? Because it's at the top of the scale. Tell us.
Well, Google product experts they used to be known as top contributors. There is a forum. It's almost like an old-fashioned forum, similar to the ones like pre-2000, and like old bulletin board systems almost. And when you have a problem with your Google listing, you go to support first. If support is not helpful, then you go to this Google Business Profile Help Forum. The people who help on there are all volunteers, and they are of varying levels of knowledge about about how to fix things. There are 5 levels on there of volunteers. You can just answer a question anyway. But if you enroll in Google's program, there are 5 levels, the top of which is Diamond. People always ask me, how long did it take you to get there? And I actually got there a lot quicker, I would say, than most. It took me about 4 or 5 years of volunteering on this forum and maintaining a consistent presence, learning about a lot of different topics. There's not just one topic on there. People come in for everything from phone numbers to photos to, somebody's trying to scam me, to my listings disappeared, and then reinstatements. So that's it. I was the first woman to get it, and I was the only woman for 3 months. I was so proud of myself, and then somebody else got it.
Do you know how many people there are with the diamond product designation?
I would say there are probably product experts in general. There are, I would say maybe 100. But of the people at the diamond level, I would say maybe there are 10 for this product, which is, again, global. I mean, I've helped people as long as it's in English.
So that is very significant. That is very rarefied air.
It is because, well, first of all, I realize how much of a niche it is, that not everyone will need our help. But it's the sort of thing where I've heard so many times, I didn't even know that this existed. And, I know a lot of times people say, well, if Google had this or Google had that. And I say flat out, look, I'm not here to apologize for Google. I'm just here to help you get from, where you are to where you need to be. And in that respect, let's move on. Because sometimes they're saying rightfully so that Google, doesn't explain certain things. And I'm like, well, you found me now. So, here I am. But again, people don't usually know about Google product experts until they need them. And when they need them, they're like, thank God that somebody, like you exists.
And what powers do you have that regular SEOs, civilians don't have? Do you have an access to a Google team that others do not?
What we have, see, you go up as you kind of level up in the program. There are a few different perks. Like we meet usually once a week with a team of Google community managers. They fill us in on information. We fill them, we give them feedback, things like that. And other than that, I think they ask for, there's nothing like define. I can tell you things that are nuance issues, but for the most part, things are not defined. There are some things that I've just done more than other people. So I tend to know how to do, certain troubleshooting issues. I also help mentor other people in terms of actual like concrete things that we do. I would say, like I said, the meetings become very important at the kind of the third level, which is gold. Oh, there's also a yearly summit from the top two levels.
And it gives you a depth of knowledge just by speaking with other experts in the program as well as Google that is definitely unusual. Why don't we talk about, you just gave a presentation on the common violations so that people, setting the scene, the Google business profile is the vital anchor point really to your visibility online. And yet, if you make mistakes in setting it up or changing certain parameters such as office location and so on, you can get locked out. And then the challenge becomes, who do you call for help? Most people then would be emailing back and forth with Google and hoping they get folks to help them solve the problem, but that isn't always the case. So the first place that we advise for our clients is don't poke your GBP, don't mess around with it if it's working. And maybe you can go into what you just talked about at a presentation. What are the common policy violations that are causing GBPs to get shut down? So maybe start out by answering, if you're a plumbing company owner, what's the one thing you should never, never, never do to your Google business profile for fear of getting locked out of it? Maybe start with that.
Okay. The first most important thing that I have seen for plumbers, home service people, epoxy flooring, the whole drill is showing your address when you work from home or working from a place that does not have permanent signage. Google is very specific about being able to direct users to a business. They recommend, usually it's been this way for a while, but when a user comes in and says, say, plumber near me, or even not near me, just plumber, the near me is inherent in that at this point, and Google will come back with somebody in your neighborhood. They give extra credit, so to speak, to businesses that show their address. The problem is, in my experience, plumbers work from their homes because they're not fixing a tub at their home. They're going to your house and they're doing the work. The problem is that Google does not want that address to show unless you have signage there. So when I say signage and they say permanent signage, that is wood, that is plastic, that is metal, that is either on the building or on a road sign or something similar. If merchants don't have that address, they are supposed to hide the listing. Hide the address. You do that in your settings. There's a little toggle. It says something like show address to I don't know, users, and you say no. When people don't do that, it's really relatively easy to report. And it's frustrating because, a lot of businesses just go on like that. They don't understand the rules. And they go on and they set this up not realizing it's problematic. And then they get dinged, they get suspended, and they don't know why. And I just look at the listing and I'm like, do you have signs there? What kind of signs? If you have a sign, it's not a banner, is it? It's not a piece of paper on a door. Oh, it is. That's why you got suspended. Or you don't have any signage there. That's why you got suspended. The most important thing, I hate to say this, is the biggest thing you could do before setting this up, or if you have been suspended, is to look at Google's guidelines. The guidelines for it's called the guidelines, Google's guidelines for representing your business. That page is an excellent resource. It explains to you, do you put LLC after your business name? No, they don't want that. When do you show your address? When do you not show your address? What kind of addresses can be used? Sometimes they will tell you flat out, home addresses are fine. Apartment addresses are fine. Just make sure you don't, if you don't have the signage, don't put them, show the address. But co-working spaces, virtual addresses, PO box, USPS, things like that. No, those don't work.
The case of a plumber who is working from home, do you believe that the suspension will be because of a report, a third-party report, or is Google actually policing this actively?
That's a really good question. I believe it's more the former than the latter. I believe that people are saying, hey, I'm following the rules. I'm number 4, so I'm not being shown in the top 3. But this guy's not following the rules, so why should he get what I consider to be my spot? And so he gets reported. And I mean, it could be reported by a competitor. It could be reported by an SEO agency. It could get reported by a local guide who wants points. But that's usually what I think it is. I mean, it could be some other elements as well that you wouldn't think of directly. Things like if somebody, and I've seen this, if someone is trying to use that address, okay, like say you moved, say you registered a Google listing at this address and you worked there for 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and then you moved. Well, if somebody else is going to use that address because you've moved out of that space and they're told they can't, their listing gets suspended because they're using the same address that you're no longer in, Google may see that, or those people may fight back and say, look, they're not there, and then you get suspended. There could be other issues. Your listing could have reviews on it from somebody who is a known spammer. By association, you could get suspended. There's a bunch of like really far out options that could unfortunately form a perfect storm that results in your getting suspended. But I would say the majority of the time, I do think it's somebody else reporting it. I will say that much.
But I'd like to ask more in-depth questions on that, but let's use that as a springboard. Let's say that happens and somebody reaches out to you. What would you do in your role to fix that problem if you were given the reins?
First thing I do is I would check that they still exist at that address, and if they don't, obviously we're gonna deal with that. But then I start out by asking them if they have signage, if so, what kind, and show me a photo. Then I would say, okay, well, we're going to work on this. And I would ask for their photos. If I cannot see the listing because it's been suspended, ask for screenshots of the listing to take a look at it. And then I ask for supporting paperwork. Paperwork is the big deal these days. I've had people come to me with one document and it kills me because I'm like, you can't, you need more than that. But I usually ask for, a minimum of 5 pieces of business paperwork. I've had people submit up to over 15. And I've now started a list because I want to make sure that I've got, for inspiration purposes. Because if people tell me, well, I don't have anything, I'm like, oh, go find the list and give them some ideas. But that's what I generally do. I start by looking at the listing itself, looking at the address, looking at the signage, photos or not, and then I look at the paperwork. The paperwork needs to be consistent. That's the biggest thing. It needs it needs to align 100% with whatever's been added to the Google listing, and it needs to be from authoritative bodies. I also look at, excuse me, their digital footprint. Do they have social media? And if the social media is out there, does it have the same name? And when possible, does it have the address showing and the phone number and the website URL? Making sure that their digital footprint is consistent. I also look at their website to make sure that their address shows in the footer and on the contact us page. A lot of times people don't have that. I do tell them, and they will come back to me and say, I don't want to do that. My answer is, we'll do it for a little while. Do it while Google is verifying the listing. After that, take out the street address, just have, for SEO purposes, the city, the state, and the zip. But I've been very lucky because most people are kind of compliant with that. They'll either go in and enter it, or their developer will be helpful with it. But that's where I start. Look at all these factors.
And Amy, do you handle then the application or reapplication, the communication management with Google directly?
I can start out. There's actually kind of 2 points. Process for getting a listing back is that you are first offered an appeal. If that appeal, and then during that appeal, I always have to point this out because I sometimes forget, you have 60 minutes. They actually say to you in 3 different places, are you ready to submit your paperwork? You have 60 minutes. They said 3 times before you actually start. So you have 5 fields in which you can upload information, upload proof. They give you examples of proof. And then there's 5 fields in which you can upload things. You can do that. And then there's if that's rejected, you either are offered or a link can be provided to you to request a second appeal. If that appeal is also rejected, your only option going forward is to go to the Google Business Profile Help Forum, sometimes called Help Community, I think, and post there and ask for escalation. I can step in. Working privately for folks, I can step in at any time. I can step in when they first have the problem before they do anything. I can step in when they need to be appealed. Whenever I step in, I am very, very specific to do exactly what I outlined before. I look at everything from their digital footprint to their documentation, to the listing, to the photos, to just everything. And I've got to say, most product experts I know, I think most of them do the same thing. And I've had a really long string of successes. I don't think there's a consistency to how everybody does their reinstatements. Maybe if you work for an agency, there may be a certain consistency there, like amongst more, 2 or more people. But I will say that at this time, I do this pretty much on my own. I've had a lot of good luck. I've had a lot of good luck also because the way I present the information to Google is very clear and specific. I don't say, go look here, go do that. I say, oh, look at this one example. I had one time where I don't remember what time, I think they were electricians, and the one company purchased the second company. And the company wanted to go in and change the listing for the second company. It was an older man who had retired and sold his company, which is fine. Well, they didn't have, Google's like, no, you can't change the name. And my presumption was that Google thought that they were scammers or spammers. So what we ended up doing was, as opposed to like the paperwork that I talked about before, we have government paperwork, things like that. I said, I want you to please provide me with your ownership documentation and anything that can prove that this gentleman sold this to you. Then I went in and I got technical documentation from their website, one of which was like, most people, I got to know you can get that. I said, you have to be creative. And I got all that together. And the first time Google had issues, but the second time it went through, and was very, very happy with that. Again, because you have to be able to be flexible with these. It's not always just do, step 1, 2, and 3, and then you're done. A lot of times it's, you have to kind of roll with the situation. Like I said before about somebody who said, well, we couldn't get a lease for the property because of, something with the landlord. I had somebody else who said they couldn't get a business license because, and this was somebody in, I believe, Indonesia, who said they couldn't get a business license because there were no business licenses where they were, and all the businesses were, I said, does your mayor or city council have anything? And he said the big man could sign something. And I'm immediately, I just don't want to tell you what I thought of. And I said, no, that would be good. So he had a document.
That'll satisfy Google.
Yeah. But again, you have to kind of roll with the situation. You have to figure out what it is that you need and what the business can provide. And so that's how that works.
Let me ask you, Amy, plumbing companies, especially the bigger ones that are multi-location, have brick and mortars. They would love to add GBP locations because that increases their footprint. And remember, we talked at the beginning that in a geogrid that might be, or the map around your GBP, where your GBP can be visible, might be 100 square miles in some cases. And so it's valuable. This is really a very important asset to a plumbing company's digital infrastructure, but you can't cover the country with one GBP. You have to add additional ones. Now, the question is, what is the right way to do so? Now, in the old days and other industries, people would say, well, go to Regis and pay $100 to a Regis facility. That doesn't work anymore. What's your advice now to a plumbing company that, for example, in a large market like the tri-state area where you are, to build a patchwork? Is there a good strategy, an appropriate strategy for how to do that so that a plumbing company with 25 trucks might end up with 6 GBPs? What's the right way that they would expand to make that happen?
The first thing is I will say I'm very white hat. I'm not underhanded. I'm not manipulative. And I just don't care about those methods, to be honest. What I would start with is by pointing out that a Google listing generally recommends you within anywhere from 2 to 5 miles only of your location. As a result, you're going to need representation in other areas. Now, the first thing I say, this flips us back going from GBP to SEO, local SEO. The first thing I would suggest is having location pages on the website for the areas you want to target. If you're located in, say, northern New Jersey, but you want to go to the Bronx, you want to go to Westchester, you want to go to southern New York State, you want to go to central New Jersey, all of these areas should have their own page on the website, and they should be thoroughly optimized for that area, for that location as much as possible. You also want to ask for reviews that mention those areas. You want to have social media that talks about those areas. But the next thing that's most important is start out by having, first of all, just a well-optimized website that's also has a good internal linking structure is also very helpful. But overall, the other thing is when we want to talk about multiple Google listings, you need to talk about having a legit location. I have had people who have gotten, and I still think that there is such a market for this that somebody is not filling, and they really need to. I've had people I had somebody who was moving out of her area, but still wanted to be represented there. So what she did was she talked to, and this is Texas. So I'm not sure where your clients are, but there's a lot of Texas. Well, what they did was the client mentioned they had an outbuilding. So what they did was they already ran their business from there. So what they did was they split it up into 2 distinct office areas. This woman put her signage outside. She made sure that there was like suite 1 and suite 2 that were okay with the post office. And then that's what she used. So not only did she go from a service area to a storefront, so she got all this extra stuff. And meanwhile, she moved 45 minutes away. The issue is that you need to have a legit space. The other person who I did want to mention saying that this is a missed business opportunity is that the other person got the equivalent of, I swear to you, it was maybe 10 feet deep and about 5 feet, 4 feet wide. And it was closet, but it was within another office space. It had a door. It had permanent signage in the lobby. Her name was on the lobby. Her business name was on the lobby directory. When you went to the office, sign was up, opened it up. There was like a desk along one wall. There was chairs. There were a few file cabinets, and that was her office. I know somebody else who had, I think it was a conference room for an office. It was, repurposed from something else. Those spaces, if you can find them, are not that expensive per month, and they will allow you to now have visibility in that physical area, in that geographic area. And that's the best way. If you want to have visibility in Google over a wide geographic area, the best thing you could do is lease yourself, even if you need a small office. If you are working out of a garage, ask them, look, is this, can I get mail here? Can I say it's a suite number? If you don't control the whole thing. If you control the whole thing, even, all's the better. What you always have to think about when looking at a new location is, the first one is anyone else there who is using that address, using the same category as you want to be using? If they are, forget about it. Go someplace else, because only if two businesses are using the same address, only one of them is going to show. So you need to make sure that you're not in there with someone else. And then also you need to look at it and think of, am I going to be able to put signage, and is it a legit space relative to, say, like, talking US here, relative to the Postal Service? If the Postal Service doesn't recognize it, you can't get mail there. It's not going to help. You want to get something at which that's basically legit, whether it's a storefront or similar. You can't use people's homes. You can use an owner's home, but you can't use like a staff member's home. You always want to look towards suspension. Would I have enough paperwork, the right paperwork, to come back from a suspension? With a secondary location, what you'd need, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that a secondary location does not need a lot of the same information that, I think it's the information for the primary business, but for a secondary location, you need, for that specific place, you need the lease, you need utility bills, and if there's signage, you need, signage there. For a while early this year, it was noted that Google had removed the term utility bills from one place. So people are like, I can't submit utility bills anymore, but they didn't. And they actually put it back because of just different things. But if you have a secondary location, that's something you need to think about. So when people say, well, I'm just going to do it at my employee's place, not unless you have a lease, you pay a utility bill, and you have, if you're going to use the address, if you have signage. You can use it as a service area, but I'm not sure how many service areas you can attach to one business, because I think there's a limit. I'm not sure of the number.
But it is worth the effort, because if
Yes.
you consider the amount of revenue that is coming through the GBP, each GBP, it's significant. And if you compare that to the cost of a billboard or a Facebook campaign, and you just consider the rental for such a facility as just a marketing expense, it can be very worthwhile doing. And I guess the conclusion here is that you're saying this can be done as long as it's done in the correct way, and that's very promising.
Yes, the biggest thing, as I said, in choosing a location, the two biggest things I think are choosing a location at which no one else is an address, at which no one else is currently using that address with your category. And the second thing is just making sure it's a legit address relative to Google's guidelines. And as long as you have looked into both of those, that's great. Go for it. As I said, I do think somebody should create a bunch of really small not just co-working spaces, but like closet-sized spaces, because small businesses would just love those. If you had
Hmm.
like 10 or 15 of them within what was previously, I don't know, a space that people are no longer, where a business was, say, is now fully remote. Oh man, those would really, really work well, because then people would have enough of a physical space in that geographic area that worked with Google's guidelines.
So, Amy, as we wrap up here, can I ask some rapid fire questions that a
Sure,
diamond expert
sure.
could answer? Can a profile get shut down based on who is granted access? Is that a
Yes,
risk?
it would go by the email account. If an email account has been restricted by Google, everything attached to it, every Google property attached to it can be affected. I'm speaking from personal experience. Like, I was in local guides, then all of a sudden I wasn't. No explanation, no anything. It took a few hours, then all of a sudden my Google listing went down. I knew how to deal with it. And this was before I was a Google product expert. I figured out that, made the connection. But yes, you want to make sure that any email that is a user on your listing does not leave reviews and does not suggest edits. If they do anything like that, it's really questionable whether they should be a user on your listing, because they could take the listing down. And yes, this does sometimes affect multiple listings. And I unfortunately imagine what that looks like. It's like, dominoes, doot, 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 doot. And the agency is just sitting there going, all the work I'm going to have to do to get those back.
But it also means that when people are adding email addresses at an agency, they need to be mindful. Now, is that remediated with the removal of that email address?
And then applying for reinstatement. A lot of people are under the belief that if there's something wrong with their Google listing and they fix it, Google will immediately, it will immediately get back online, and that's not true. Once you fix it, you still have to apply for reinstatement. So you still have to go back and get all the paperwork and the photos and, go through the process.
What is a malicious suggested edit? You mentioned that in your
Oh,
recent presentation.
oh yeah. That's when
That's another
people,
reason to get suspended.
it is, that is when somebody goes in and I shouldn't say, I should phrase it a little bit differently, but what I meant was, if you're listing, like I said, if you have a competitor and the competitor goes and sees that your address is showing and it shouldn't be, they will report you. If your title, the listing title, is not compliant with what it should be, if you've added terms to it and somebody goes in and points out to Google that that's not their business name, you could get suspended for that also. That's it generally. Or if somebody reports your reviews as being fake, that's a big one. Like, don't ever, ever, ever buy reviews, because they are getting really on top of that. They are starting to do labels on listings. They are starting to put blocks on incoming reviews. So I know how much you want them. I know how much they mean, but don't buy fake reviews. Just don't. Never going to end well.
What is spam as a reason to get shut down? You had mentioned that.
Reviews mostly. It's well, it could be your title. If you have, say, if you're, Tom's Plumbing, and you have added, and electric, and then you put the name of your town, all of that, all of those additions on there, if Google is alerted to that, they will probably take you down. But they will take you down. Could be because of the title, but it's also because now Google doesn't see that same information elsewhere online. So you need to kind of present your information to them, so that they realize that you are legit. So you have to fix the title and then go back. Other things, 100%, it's reviews. If you've only been open for, say, a year, and you are not a restaurant and you have 2,000 reviews, totally cool. If you're a hotel, if you're those sort of things, if you're an amusement park, you're going to have that number of reviews. A lot of, business categories don't have that. And it's kind of obvious when you have that. And then if you get somebody like me who can sit there and say, here's hello Google, here is why they are fake. And because I have a very set process for proving when these are fake. Google can suspend you. They will also sometimes, they have a whole process of what they're going to do. I'm not I've only seen this once in the US, and I've seen it a few times in the UK. What they will do is they will put a label on your listing for, I think, at least a month. They will put a block on your listing so that no incoming reviews, no incoming reviews will be posted. And they'll also take down all the reviews that they think are fake. And so if you're thinking of investing in fake reviews, it could be a momentary investment, and you will in the end probably lose. You lose the money that you put into that.
Amy, this is great advice. I think the moral of the story here is that what you do with Google, you need to do with a frame of complete honesty and following the rules. And you can make innocent mistakes, which is why you need good guidance from people like you. And it's important not to try to cut corners. But if you do it right, then you'll be rewarded.
100%. They're free listings. Everybody continues to point out they're free listings. Mike, yeah, I used to say anybody can get a Google listing, but not everybody can keep it. These days, it's even getting more difficult to get a Google listing because they're checking so many things in advance. They're definitely worth having. If you don't have one, you're just missing out, just lost opportunity for you. So it's really worth the effort to get the listing started. Keeping it white hat, keeping it complying with Google's guidelines, and it's just a total funnel for new clients to come in and find you. And you don't want to miss out.
And with that, Amy, thank you for being at the table and telling us about the Google Business Profile. And everyone will see you in the next video.